I'm curious, how many of you, does anybody else like the show Mythbusters? Ever watch the show Mythbusters? Okay. I love I love the show, and what for those of you that have never seen it before, basically what Mythbusters does is they take a myth, whether it may be a cliche, it may be kind of something out of a movie scene, it may just be kind of one of these things that everybody tends to believe, and then they set out with the goal of trying to determine whether it is true or not. Okay, hence the name Myth Busters. And they do a lot of stuff. They deal with questions of, is it, do you get better gas mileage when you are driving with the air conditioner on or with the windows down? Can you drive through a house like they did in the movie Twister, and have it happen? Or can you kill a group of assassins using nothing but, vinegar, steel wool, and a microwave? Questions that we all, I think, are really worried about. But but one of the things I always love about it, if you've seen the show, you're kind of like me, is that they start off with kind of this movie scene or a myth. It's like that if you fire a gun in a room where there's a gas leak, does the room explode or not? So that's kind of the myth. And then they go through it, and by the end of the show, what they have done is filled a sealed room with hydrogen gas, and then they light a flare in the middle of it just to watch it blow up. And so it's kind of, I love how it always gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the fun of the show. But the reason that I kind of say this is because I think that one of the things the show unknowingly did is that it reminded us of the power of myths, that there are a lot of things that we believe just because a lot of people believe them. Okay, just because it's kind of the way that we were brought up or it's things that we were taught. There are ideas that have really become kind of a part of our conscious, okay, even though they're not true. And so we believe them and we respond to them as such. And they're things that kind of sound good. They make sense on the surface, but when you dig a little bit deeper, we find out they're not true. And the reason this is important is because I think that it is the same way for the Christian. I remember telling somebody one time I was thinking about doing a series called, Dumb Things That Smart Christians Believe, and their exact words were, that would be a long series. Could be. It very well could be. We're gonna limit it. Okay, I had some great ideas. I put it on Facebook and got some good stuff. I had some things that I was going to ask as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make this our summer series. And so if you want to invite your friends and tell them, hey, we're going to talk about dumb things that smart Christians believe for the summer, then please invite your friends, invite your neighbors. They'll like coming so they can maybe laugh at us and maybe they'll learn something. But here's the reason why this is important. I do want to say one thing. Please understand, this is not things that dumb Christians believe. This is dumb things that smart Christians believe. And what I mean by that, there are a lot of smart, well-intentioned Christians that just, we have grown up hearing these things, and they become a part of who we are, and we believe them, and we live, and we operate in them. And they're not true. And what happens is that one day life slaps us in the face, and we realize that maybe this is not true. And that's dangerous sometimes. And I want to give you kind of a little bit of a illustration, whatever you want to call it. A few years back, we took family vacation. We went to Colorado, okay? And so while we're in Colorado, we stop at a trading post. And when you go to the trading post, one of the things that they sell in Colorado is rocks. You can buy a bag or a box of rocks if you would like to. And so as we were going, we got there, and I remember, Joshua and Jackson are going through them, and Jackson found one that he really, really wanted, and because it looked like gold. And so he wanted to buy a big old bag of gold is what he wanted. But it was not gold, it was fool's gold. And so we tried to explain to him, the fact that everything that glitters is not gold. That was kind of a hard conversation to have. But here's the reason that I say this is important. Imagine we didn't want to have that conversation with him. We want to just let him believe that yes, because looks like gold, that it is gold. And so he goes through life doing that, and then one day he gets older and he decides, you know what? I found a place where there's a whole bunch of this in the ground, and so I am going to mortgage my house, quit my job, buy the equipment. I'm going to go and I am going to mine this vein of what looks like gold. Now, what happens when he goes to cash it out so that he can go pay off all the debts that he has incurred? If he's lucky, he's just a little embarrassed or he's a little frustrated. But what happens if that ends up costing him everything? What if, because of that, he starts to resent his parents? He resents Tammy and I because when he was young, we didn't tell him the truth. We let him believe this lie that was gold and it had value. And here's the reason I say that this applies to Christians as well. There are things that we have come to kind of believe, and they become a part of who we are and our vernacular and the things that we do. Our faith sometimes even follows these veins when the fact is they're not true. So what happens, though, when life smacks us in the face? What happens when all of a sudden we realize that something that we believed is not true? Do we get embarrassed? Frustrated? Hopefully that's all there is to it. But what happens if it is something that because of it we become so angry that we begin to resent and to hate God because now we found out that this is not true and we turn our back on Him? What if we continue to perpetuate these lies, these falsehoods? And as a result, it pushes other people off from coming to faith. And the reason I say is because this ain't a game. And the reason that I'm doing this series, is not so that you can have the right answer to the question on a test or so that you can do some Christian trivia. It's because this is life and death stuff. This is important. And we need to treat it as such. And so what we're going to do, we're going to jump right in. I think one of the, a foolish thought, once again, dumb things smart, well-intentioned Christians believe, okay? It is not the Christian who is dumb. It is the thing that is dumb. It is the thing that is foolish. The first one is, and I want to start off today, is that faith can fix anything. Faith can fix anything. To do that, we're going to be, if you want to turn, we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11. It is better known as the Faith Hall of Fame, the great faith chapter. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to start off in verse 1. We're going to be reading some of that. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, you can. And the reason is because I think we need to establish what it is that faith really is in order to determine, why it, and by the way, when I say these, if you're taking the Mythbusters approach, we're not trying to make these and find out if they're confirmed or plausible or busted. They're all busted, okay? They are dumb things that smart Christians believe, okay? And so we're going to determine here, what is faith? We need to know why it is that this is not true. Hebrews 11, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see." And that is going to cause somebody to turn around and say, oh, okay, so faith is just blind trust. Faith is just blind trust. It's just wishful thinking. And if that is you, I want to say slow down. Slow down, because that's not true. I honestly believe that the word faith, the concept of faith, is probably one of the more misunderstood words when it comes to Christian theology. Okay? And I think it is because we misidentify the concept of faith. And so we're going to read a little bit more. This time, though, we're going to slow down. We're going to read it, and then we're going to kind of, come back a little bit and talk about it. So, Hebrews 11:1, we're going to go on to verse 2. It says, "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for," is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. Now listen to that. What this is saying, this passage is not so much about what faith is, it is more about what faith does. Hebrews 11:1 isn't there to tell us all what faith is, but it is to lay out the foundation for an example of what faith does. How do we know that? Because we know that this, okay, being sure of what they hadn't seen, certain of what they had not seen, is what the ancients were commended for. And I want to give you a phrase and say, if we were to boil it down, faith is man's reaction to God's actions. Faith is man's reactions to God's actions. Man's reaction to God's promises. Man's reaction to God's assurances. That is what faith is. E.J. Carnell, he's a Christian theologian, he's an apologist, he defined it this way. He said, faith is the whole-souled trust in God's word as true because of the sufficiency of the evidence. That's what faith is because that's what faith does, okay? The problem is I think we have this idea that somehow faith is this thing that we can measure, that you can put it in a beaker and you have so much of it. And do you have a little faith, a lot of faith? What do you have, okay? Did anybody ever watch the movie Leap of Faith? Ever seen the movie? It's an old, I think like 92 was when it came out, but it had Steve Martin, Deborah Winger, Liam Neeson, had a really good cast. Honestly, it's a pretty good movie. It really is. If you get a chance, watch it. But what it is, in Leap of Faith, Steve Martin plays the part of, he's a traveling evangelist by the name of Jonas Nightingale. But he's a not so much evangelist as he is con man, okay? And so what he does, he goes around and he uses all kinds of techniques, whether it's, insider information or whether it is, kind of different cons and illusions and whatever else to convince the people that come to these revivals that miracles are happening. Amazing miracles are happening. And the goal is what? That they're going to open up their wallets and they're going to give you money. And so in the movie, they go to this little town. I think it's Rustwater, Kansas, if I remember correctly, is the name of the town. So they go to this little town, and which, by the way, Kansas is not such a bad place. Everybody gives it such a bad rap. But now there's certain parts, Lawrence, that are, but the rest of it's good people. No. Goes to Kansas, he appears there. Well, come to find out what happens in this town, there's this boy who has braces on his legs, who can't walk without the braces or without crutches. And so their concern is that he's going to come to the revival one night and he's going to expect to be healed. And so they're trying to lament this. And so what they do is they're trying to figure out what in the world to do. And in the course of that, they say, well, you know what? If he does, we've always got our insurance card, okay? And their insurance plan is you didn't have enough faith. Okay, lack of faith. And so that's what it is. If he doesn't get healed, it's because you didn't have enough faith. If he doesn't get healed, it's because somebody else in that auditorium, somebody else at that revival had doubts. They didn't have enough faith. And I think that sometimes that's where we get this idea that if something doesn't happen, it's because there wasn't enough faith. And as a result, faith gets treated as kind of like a magic potion or a secret talisman that if we wield it correctly, then it'll do anything. That it'll fix anything. In other words, if we are absolutely sure, if we count it as done, if we have enough positive thoughts, if we muster all of that, then God has no option but to say yes, right? I mean, as long as we claim our blessing, declare our healing, sow our seed, and we'll reap the rewards because that's how it works because we have enough faith. But is that right? No, it's not right. But I do want to look at where I think how we got here sometimes to this misconception about faith. In the English translation of the Bible, there are three words that are actually quite closely associated and correlated, okay? The first one is faith, and this is the word that it gives us the connotation of confidence, okay? It's the opposite of fear and doubt. It's what we find in our key verse, which is Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for. It's certain of what we do not see. Okay, that's the first word that is faith. The second that we have is the word believe. Believe gives us the image of intellectual assent, okay? That we think in our mind. We think that something is true. It's a word that shows up, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life, okay? And so that is belief. And then, we have the last word we have is trust. And trust gives us the image of accompanying action. It's our response to faith and belief, okay? We find this in John 14:1. Jesus said, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. Three words at the heart of the discussion that seem to have kind of different meanings. They're close, but they seem to have different meanings. Would it surprise you to know that all three of those words they're translated in our English translation as three different things, but they are all pistis. The Greek word is the same. In fact, you have 243 times that word pistis is in the New Testament, and it is translated either as faith, belief, or trust. Same word. And now this is not to say that our English translations are wrong. That is not what I'm getting to here. What I'm saying is that in Scripture, in God's Word, faith, belief, and trust are the same thing. There is no difference between the three. They go together hand in hand because they are the same thing, which means that faith is more than just confidence, which means faith is more than just an intellectual assent that we believe that something is true. Faith is all three of these, which is why I go back and I say that faith is man's reaction to God's action. Faith is man's reactions to God's promise. Faith is man's reaction to God's assurance. Your faith is your reaction to God's action, to what he has promised. That is what faith is. So let's go back now. With that in mind, let's go back to Hebrews 11. Okay. And by the way, I want to say, speaking of trust, okay, don't take my word for this. Don't. All throughout the Scriptures, what do you find? You will find the writers of the New Testament and all their letters saying time and time again, check me on this. Okay? That's what we are told to do. So, listen to the message, take some notes, and then this afternoon, go home and make sure that what I said is right. And if you get an argument with me, if you disagree with me, come see me. I'm serious. I don't want you to just take this good. Well, Jeff said. Because you know what? That's why there are some dumb things that smart Christians believe. Because the guy said them. Because the preacher when I was growing up said it. Because the guy on TV said it. Whatever, okay? So don't just take my word for it. Seriously. Listen, take notes, go home, check it out. Okay? But I want Hebrews 11. I want to go back here because we read this. It is awe-inspiring to start to believe what we find that is accomplished in faith. We know that by faith, Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. We know that by faith, Noah built an ark and saved his family. We know that by faith, Abraham and his wife Sarah gave birth at a ripe old age and gave birth to Isaac, and then Abraham became the father of nations. We know that by faith, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt through the Red Sea as if they were walking on dry land. We know that it is by faith that Joshua led the people through the Jordan River into the promised land. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. We haven't even gotten into Samson and David and Samuel and Gideon, any of them. We haven't even talked about them. Okay? And so, as we're reading this, it would seem that faith properly applied can fix anything, right? No. No. We know that faith shut the mouth of lions. It has quenched flames. We know that it has raised the dead to life. Okay? And the reason that I say that this belief that faith can fix anything is because if you've been around very long, you know that I will always tell you there's three things that are very important when you're reading Scripture and checking things, okay? The first one is context, the second is context, and then the third would be context. Okay, whenever you read anything, read it in context, context, context. So we can sit here and read this passage, and you can read Hebrews 11, start in verse 1, and you can run through every bit of this, and you'll be like, oh my goodness, look at the amazing things that were accomplished by faith. By faith. By faith. By faith. By faith. By faith. All of these things happen. But I want to go, we're going to skip down a little bit here. So if you're in Hebrews 11, get down to verse 35. And we're going to read something. And by the way, if you have never read this before, it will, honestly, it'll kind of mess with your head. Okay, it will. Because he says, women receive back their dead, raised to life again. Others, listen to this, others were tortured. And so, once again, context, Hebrews 11:1, faith is being sure of what we hope for, certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, by faith, by faith, by faith, by faith, by faith, by faith. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, while still others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. They were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. Verse 39, these were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. So, whoa. Here are men and women with vibrant faith, but it led to different results. They were tortured, they were persecuted, they were flogged. They were stoned to death. They were sawed in two. They were left but nothing but animal skins to wear. They lived in holes in the ground. Never received what was promised. But the thing is, as you look at this, these were not the rejects. These were not the ones that didn't get it. These were not the ones that didn't have enough faith, that didn't understand. These were the ones who were commended by God for their faith. And hear me on this. Faith may lead you. It may lead you to the palace. It may lead you to prison. Faith may lead you to an abundant life. It may lead you to an early death. I don't know. And this is the hard thing, because sometimes we're like, boo, I don't like that. But the fact is that faith is our response to God's actions. The results are up to Him. And we don't always like to hear that. But verse 2 says that they were commended for their faith. In other words, they were commended for their response to God's actions and His promises. And as we read the Bible, there's a recurring theme that is faith has nothing to do with our feelings. It has everything to do with our actions. You know, I've said it before that if our beliefs don't drive our actions, can we really call them beliefs? And in the same way, if our faith doesn't drive us to action, can we really call it faith? And according to James, brother Jesus, James 2:17, he'd say no. He says, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. In other words, faith without action, hear me on this, faith without action is simply faith in faith. It's not faith in God. Faith without action is faith in faith, not faith in God. And you may be sitting there thinking, Jeff, you have no clue what you're talking about, because we saw that faith can overcome fear, and faith can overcome this, and faith can overcome that. Can it? Can faith alone overcome fear? Can faith alone overcome armies? Can faith alone overcome these obstacles, these trials? No, it cannot. But the fact is that faith is only as good as the object of your faith. And that is the point, is that faith will not get you out of anything. Faith alone, faith in itself will not save you. But faith in God can sustain us. It can encourage us, empower us. There's a common characteristic that you read as you read Hebrews 11:1, and I challenge you to go back. Read all of Hebrews 11. Go back, read through it, and the one characteristic you're going to find is that these people, they reacted in trust, no matter what it looked like was ahead of them, no matter what the consequences were. Okay, no matter how stacked against them the odds were, and I mean, they move forward. And the thing is to understand, faith that is properly placed will never defeat or overcome anything. But what it will do is that it will enable us to endure and to push through, knowing that God is faithful, knowing that God is in charge. And here's another thing that faith cannot do. Faith cannot guarantee results. Okay? Can't guarantee results. Paul, we know, asked 3 different times to have the thorn in his flesh removed. Don't tell me that Paul didn't have enough faith. Okay? Paul asked, but then he left the results to God. Joseph never saw the promised land. But Joseph trusted that God said his people would be set free. And so what did he say? He said to his brother, he said, hey, he goes, when you go, take my bones with you. That is a man's reaction to God's assurances. Man's reaction to God's actions. And I think the fact is that, like I said, faith can't fix anything, but God never promised that it would fix everything, did he? Did God ever say that faith would fix everything? No, the only thing that God said, what our faith fixed, we are saved by the grace of God through faith in Jesus. Through faith, through belief, and through trust. And that's what it is, those 3 words. We are saved by the grace of God through our faith, our confidence in Jesus. We are saved by the grace of God through our belief in our head and in our heart that there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. We are saved by the grace of God through our willingness to trust that the atoning sacrifice of Jesus is sufficient to overcome everything that we have done. See, faith in itself cannot fix anything. But faith in God can get us through everything. Faith, belief, trust. It is our reaction to his assurances. And it's really, when we hear that, because I'm sorry, you will hear a lot of Christians, and they will say that faith can fix anything if you have enough faith. If you have enough faith. If you have enough faith. To be honest, I probably said it myself. Shame on me. Shame on me. Because faith on its own doesn't do anything. You can have faith in a doorknob. You can have faith in your bank account. You can have faith in anybody or anything. It won't get you anywhere. Only faith in God. It is the object of your faith. It is the object of your belief. It is the object of your trust that will fix everything. There's one thing that we were promised. And that is that if we have faith in Jesus, that we will be saved, that he will overcome our greatest problem, which is sin and death. Jesus himself, the very one who died on the cross for our sins, the one who rose from the grave, the author and the perfecter of our faith, made it very clear that in this world we will have trouble. Our faith is not about getting rid of troubles. Our faith is not getting rid of trials. Our faith is trusting God through them, trusting him in them, believing that he has a plan and a purpose, and he will bring us out on the other side, that he's working in us, that he's working through us, but above all, that he loves us. Faith alone can't fix it. Faith in God will get us through anything. So we're going to have our time of decision. And I just have a question for you. This really is. If you look at your life, if you look at what you believe, at what you say, how you respond to things, do your reactions show that you have faith in God's actions? What do your reactions say in response to God's promises, to God's assurances? Because that's the first place it starts. Faith begins with us making a decision that no matter what's thrown in front of us, we trust him. I'm going to ask you to stand. I want to pray. And then we're going to have our time of decision. And we're going to open up our prayer rooms. If you would like somebody to pray with you, somebody to pray for you, please step into one of those rooms. Maybe you have a decision to make today. Maybe you want to rededicate your life today. Whatever it is, I'm just going to please respond and react to what it is that God is laying upon your heart right now. Would you pray with me? God.